The plane hadn't even left the tarmac, and already the air was thick with screams. Not the kind you'd expect at 30,000 feet, but the raw, guttural kind that made your skin crawl. Colonel Marcus Kane sat in seat 14C, his service dog, Bravo, curled tightly at his feet. A decorated Delta Force commander, Marcus had faced gunfire, ambushes, and worse in places most people couldn't pronounce. But nothing prepared him for the humiliation about to unfold on Flight 237 to Atlanta. His dark eyes scanned the cabin, hyper-aware, a habit from years of covert ops. Bravo, a German shepherd with a service vest as battle-worn as Marcus's soul, sensed his tension and pressed closer. The flight attendant, Karen Wells, strutted down the aisle like she owned the sky. Her blonde ponytail swung with every step. Her lips pursed in a way that screamed she'd already decided who belonged and who didn't. Marcus felt her gaze linger on him too long, her eyes narrowing at Bravo. He'd seen that look before on checkpoints in hostile zones, in small-town diners, in places where his skin made him a target before he could open his mouth. "Sir," Karen said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "your dog can't be here. It's a safety hazard." Marcus's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket, pulling out Bravo's service papers, the ones he'd carried for years, stamped with official seals. "He's a service dog, fully certified. He stays." Karen barely glanced at the documents. "I don't care what those say. No dogs in the cabin. Move it to cargo, or you're both off this plane." The cabin went silent. Passengers shifted, their eyes darting between Marcus and Karen. A white man in a business suit across the aisle coughed nervously. A young black woman a few rows back gripped her armrests, her face a mirror of Marcus's growing anger. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice low, controlled, but carrying the weight of a man who'd stared down warlords. "This dog has saved my life more times than you've flown this route. He's not going anywhere." Karen's face flushed red. She leaned in, her voice rising. "Don't you dare talk back to me. I make the rules here." Then, in a move that stunned the entire cabin, she swung her foot, kicking Bravo hard in the ribs. The dog yelped, a sharp, pained sound that cut through the air like a gunshot. Marcus was on his feet in an instant, his 6 feet 2 inches frame towering over Karen. His hands clenched, but he didn't touch her. Years of discipline held him back. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said, his voice ablade. The cabin erupted. Passengers shouted, some in support, others in shock. A teenage girl started recording on her phone. The business suit guy yelled, "Hey lady, that's uncalled for." The young black woman stood, her voice trembling but fierce. "You can't treat people like that." Karen, unfazed, crossed her arms. "You're all overreacting. He's breaking policy, and I'm enforcing it." She turned to Marcus, her sneer venomous. "You think you're special because you've got some papers? I've seen your type before." Marcus's eyes burned, but he didn't flinch. "My type," he repeated, each word deliberate. "You mean a black man who served his country? Or a veteran with PTSD who needs his dog to function? Which part of me offends you, ma'am?" The word veteran hit the cabin like a shockwave. Passengers gasped. The business suit guy muttered, "Oh shit." The young woman's eyes widened, her anger now mixed with pride. Karen faltered, but only for a second. "I don't care who you are," she snapped. "Rules are rules." Bravo whimpered, pressing against Marcus's leg. The dog's pain fueled Marcus's rage, but he channeled it into something colder, sharper. "You don't know who I am," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "But you're about to find out." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, ordering everyone to calm down. 2 more flight attendants appeared, one trying to de-escalate, the other glaring at Marcus like he was the problem. The tension was suffocating, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Marcus knew he could end this in seconds physically, at least. He'd disarmed insurgents with less effort. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a war of perception, and he was losing. The young woman, whose name was Tasha, pushed her way forward. "I'm a lawyer," she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. "What you just did is assault, and it's on video. You're done." Karen's confidence cracked. She glanced at the teenage girl's phone, still recording. "You can't film me without consent," she shrieked, lunging for the device. The girl yanked it back, and the cabin exploded again. Shouts, accusations, chaos. Marcus raised a hand, silencing the crowd. His presence was magnetic, the kind that made enemies rethink their choices. "Enough," he said. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to get home. But I will not let you disrespect me, my dog, or anyone else on this plane because of your prejudice." The word prejudice hung in the air. Karen's face twisted, but she had no comeback. The other passengers were with Marcus now, their murmurs turning into a chorus of support. The business suit guy stood up. "I'm a witness," he said. "This is unacceptable." The second flight attendant, a younger man named Ryan, stepped forward. "Sir, I'm sorry about this. Let's get you and your dog settled." His tone was genuine, but Karen shot him a look that could have melted steel. Marcus didn't move. "I'm not settling until she apologizes. To Bravo. To me. To everyone here who's had to endure this." Karen laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "Apologize? To a dog? You're delusional." That was the spark. Tasha, the lawyer, started citing legal codes. The teenage girl uploaded her video to X, the caption reading, "Flight attendant assaults veteran service dog. Racism on Flight 237. It was already trending. Passengers began chanting, "Apologize! Apologize!" Marcus stood still, Bravo at his side, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He'd fought for his country, bled for it, lost friends for it. And now, on a domestic flight, he was fighting for his dignity. The irony wasn't lost on him. The captain emerged from the cockpit, a grizzled man in his 50s named Captain Daniels. He took one look at the scene and sighed. "What the hell is going on here?" Karen started talking, but Marcus cut her off. "Your flight attendant assaulted my service dog and disrespected me in front of this entire plane. I'm a retired Delta Force commander. I've served this country for 20 years. I deserve better than this." The captain's eyes widened. He looked at Bravo, then at Karen, whose bravado was crumbling. "Is this true?" he asked her. She stammered, "I was just enforcing policy." "By kicking a service animal?" Daniels snapped. He turned to Marcus. "Colonel, I apologize on behalf of this airline. This is not who we are." Marcus nodded, but his eyes stayed on Karen. "I'm not looking for your apology, Captain. I want hers." The cabin held its breath. Karen's face was a mask of defiance, but the weight of every stair passengers, crew, even the captain bore down on her. She opened her mouth, closed it, then muttered, "I'm sorry. It wasn't enough." Marcus shook his head. Louder. "And to Bravo." The humiliation in Karen's eyes was palpable, but she had no choice. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "To you and your dog." Marcus didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded and sat back down, stroking Bravo's head. The dog licked his hand, loyal as ever. The cabin erupted in applause, but Marcus didn't hear it. He was thinking about every time he'd had to prove his worth, his humanity, in a world that too often saw his skin first and his service second. Tasha sat beside him, her eyes fierce. "I'm filing a formal complaint when we land," she said. "And I'll represent you if you want to sue." Marcus looked at her, a faint smile breaking through. "I just want to get home, ma'am. But I appreciate you." The plane finally taxied, the tension easing but not gone. The video on X was blowing up, with thousands of comments calling for Karen's firing, for justice, for change. Marcus didn't check his phone. He didn't need to. He'd fought this battle before in different forms, and he'd fight it again. As the plane climbed, Marcus leaned down to Bravo. "You did good, boy," he whispered. The dog's tail thumped softly, a small victory in a world that still had so far to go. The hum of the plane's engines couldn't drown out the undercurrent of tension that lingered in the cabin. Marcus Kane sat back in his seat, his hand resting on Bravo's head, the dog's steady breathing a grounding force amidst the storm. The applause from the passengers had faded, but their eyes still darted toward him, some with admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with unease. Marcus felt it all, the weight of their gazes, the unspoken questions, the silent judgments. He'd carried that weight his whole life. Tasha, the lawyer who'd stood up for him, was now typing furiously on her phone, her brow furrowed. "This video's at 1 million views already," she said, glancing at Marcus. "People are livid. They're calling for the airline to fire her." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. But it's not about her. It's about what she represents." Tasha paused, her fingers hovering over the screen. "You're right. This isn't just one bad apple. It's the whole damn system." Across the aisle, the business suit guy whose name turned out to be Greg leaned over. "Hey, Colonel. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I've flown this airline for years, and I've never seen anything like that." His voice was earnest, but there was a hint of discomfort, like he was grappling with his own role as a bystander. Marcus met his eyes. "You stood up. That's more than most." His tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either, just matter of fact. Greg nodded, then sank back into his seat, clearly wrestling with something deeper. The teenage girl, Mia, who'd recorded the incident, was still glued to her phone, her thumbs flying as she responded to comments on X. "They're saying you're a hero," she said, looking up at Marcus with wide eyes. "They want to know more about you." Marcus gave a small, tired smile. "Im noaru. I'm just a man trying to live." But Mia wasn't having it. "No, you are. My dad's a vet too. He says guys like you don't get enough respect." She hesitated, then added, "Can I post about you? Like your story?" Marcus shook his head. "Appreciate it, but I don't need the spotlight. Just make sure people know Bravo's okay." He scratched the dog's ears, and Bravo's tail thumped against the floor. The flight continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Passengers whispered to each other, sharing stories of their own encounters with prejudice or unfair treatment. A middle-aged woman in a floral dress leaned over to Tasha. "I was on a flight last year where they gave me grief about my wheelchair, told me it wouldn't fit in the cabin. I had to fight tooth and nail just to board." Tasha's eyes softened. "That's why we keep fighting. They don't get to decide who's worthy of respect." Marcus listened quietly, his mind drifting back to his years in Delta Force. He'd led missions in places where trust was the only currency that mattered, trust in his team, trust in his instincts, trust in Bravo. The dog had been with him through the worst of it. A bomb blast in Kandahar that left Marcus with shrapnel scars and nightmares that never quite faded. Bravo was trained to sense his panic attacks, to nudge him back to reality when the world started closing in. Kicking Bravo wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was an attack on Marcus's lifeline. Captain Daniels emerged from the cockpit again, this time with a clipboard in hand. He approached Marcus, his expression apologetic but professional. "Colonel, I've radioed ahead. The airline's launching an investigation as soon as we land. Ms. Wells will be suspended pending review." Marcus nodded, but his eyes were on Karen, who was now seated at the back of the plane, her face pale, her arms crossed tightly. She'd been quiet since her forced apology, but Marcus could see the resentment simmering in her eyes. He knew that look, defiance born of wounded pride. She wasn't sorry. She was just cornered. "Thank you, Captain," Marcus said. "But I need to know this won't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone." Daniel sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I can't promise perfection, but I can promise we'll do better. You have my word." Marcus didn't respond. Words were cheap, and he'd heard promises like that before. He turned his attention back to Bravo, who was now lying across his feet, eyes half closed but alert. The dog's loyalty was a reminder of what mattered: trust, resilience, humanity. As the plane began its descent into Atlanta, the cabin grew quieter, the earlier chaos giving way to reflection. Tasha leaned over again. "I meant what I said about representing you. This could be a class action suit. The airline's got a history of this kind of thing: racial profiling, disability discrimination. We could make them pay." Marcus considered it for a moment. A lawsuit would be a battle, one he had the skills to win. But it would also mean reliving this moment over and over in courtrooms and news cycles. He was tired not just from the flight, but from a lifetime of fighting to be seen as more than a stereotype. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "But right now, I just want to get home to my daughter." Tasha's expression softened. "You've got a kid?" "Amara. She's 12. Smart as a whip." Marcus's voice warmed, a rare crack in his stoic facade. "She's waiting for me. Probably got a whole speech ready about how I shouldn't be late." Tasha laughed. "Sounds like my niece. You're a good dad, Colonel." Marcus didn't respond, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of pride. Amara was his reason for everything: every mission, every sacrifice, every moment he pushed through the pain. She was why he'd retired from Delta Force, why he'd chosen a quieter life, even if the world kept trying to pull him back into the fight. The plane touched down with a jolt, and the cabin stirred to life. Passengers gathered their bags, but many lingered, casting glances at Marcus. Some approached to shake his hand, their words clumsy but sincere. "Thank you for your service. I'm sorry for what happened. You handled that with class." Marcus accepted their words with a nod, but his focus was on Bravo, who stood and stretched, ready to move. The dog's resilience was a mirror of his own, knocked down but never out. As they disembarked, Marcus noticed Karen being escorted by airport security. Her head was down, her earlier bravado gone. Part of him wanted to feel satisfaction, but all he felt was exhaustion. Justice wasn't a single moment, it was a long, grueling war, and he'd been fighting it since he was old enough to understand what his skin meant to some people. Tasha walked beside him, her phone still buzzing with notifications. "The airline's trending on X," she said. "They've issued a public apology, but people aren't buying it. They want real change." Marcus glanced at her. "They always do, until the next story comes along." She frowned but didn't argue. She knew he was right. At the gate, Marcus was met by an airline representative, a woman in a crisp blazer who introduced herself as Ms. Carter. "Colonel Kane, on behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize. We're comping your flight and offering you a voucher for future travel. We'll also ensure Ms. Wells faces appropriate consequences." Marcus looked at her, his expression unyielding. "I don't want your voucher. I want your guarantee that no one else, black, white, veteran, Civilian gets treated like I was today. Miss Carter's smile faltered, but she nodded. We're reviewing our training protocols. This incident has exposed gaps. Gaps? Marcus repeated, his voice flat. Call it what it is. Bias, prejudice, racism. She flinched but didn't contradict him. We'll do better, Colonel. You have my word. Marcus didn't respond. He'd heard that promise too many times to believe it without proof. He turned to leave, Bravo at his side, but Miss Carter called after him. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. He paused, then looked back. There is. Train your people to see a person, not a problem. With that, he walked away, the weight of the day settling into his bones. Tasha caught up with him, her eyes bright with determination. I'm not letting this go, she said. I'm drafting a petition for systemic changes in airline policies. Will you sign it? Marcus hesitated. He wasn't one for petitions or protests. She preferred action. Results. But Tasha's fire reminded him of Amara, of the world he wanted for her. Send it to me, he said finally. I'll look it over. She grinned. That's a start. At baggage claim, Marcus spotted Amara waiting with her aunt, his sister, Lena. Amara's face lit up when she saw him, and she ran over, throwing her arms around him. Dad, you're late. He laughed, the sound easing the tightness in his chest. Sorry, kiddo. Had a bit of trouble on the plane. Lena raised an eyebrow. Trouble? What kind? Amara looked up at him, her eyes sharp. Was it because of Bravo? Or you know? Marcus knelt down, meeting her gaze. Both. But we handled it. Amara's face hardened. They're stupid. You're a hero. He shook his head, pulling her into a hug. Just your dad, Amara. That's enough. As they left the airport, Marcus felt the weight of the day begin to lift. The fight wasn't over, not for him. Not for anyone who'd ever been judged before they could speak. But with Bravo at his side and Amara's hand in his, he felt ready to keep going. The video Mia posted had sparked a firestorm online. Hashtags like Justice for Marcus and End Airline Bias trended for days. The airline announced new diversity training and stricter policies. But Marcus knew real change would take more than press releases. It would take people like Tasha, Mia, even Greg stepping up, speaking out, refusing to let moments like this fade. What do you think? Where does justice begin in a moment like this? Is it in the punishment of one person, or in the courage to confront a system that lets these moments happen?